Hello my dear students, I hope you people are fine. So in this video, let us start with a new chapter, that is the typical configuration of computer system. The total weightage given for this chapter is 4 marks. One question you can expect of 1 marks and one question of 3 marks. So total 4 marks. Now let us move on to the chapter. Here we are going to see some different terminologies like what is computer, hardware, software, data and users. So with all these terminologies we have come across in our first PUC. So let us begin. So as we know that computers have been extensively used in the different fields nowadays, like schools, colleges, engineering, business, training, entertainment, education purpose. So what is the purpose of using these computers? Because computers are very high speed capacity. They can handle large volume of data with a greater accuracy, and it will perform the operation without having the human intervention. With a very high speed accuracy, it will perform all kinds of the tasks assigned by the user without having the human intervention. That is why computer has been extensively being used nowadays. We'll see what exactly the computer is. The computer is a series of electrical and electronic circuits together to form a single unit to perform the required operations for the users. That means we know that in computer we have a motherboard which is completely having the series of electrical and electronic circuits. Together they form a single unit which is required to perform the operations that are required by the user. That is called as the computer. And this computer, it doesn't have any kind of intelligence. It cannot think by its own. It cannot perform the task by its own. Hence it requires the users, that means the programmers. It requires the hardware as well as the software in order to perform the different operations. Because it is unable to perform the task by itself, it cannot think, it cannot process by itself, it has to make use of the hardware, software as well as the programmers known as the users. So now let us see what is the hardware is. Hardware actually consists of the physical devices of the computer. Any devices of the computer that we may physically touch and feel. Such devices are usually termed as the hardware. Example, we can give the keyboard, monitor, printer, processor, scanners, speakers, motherboard. All the different external parts of the computers are referred to be as the hardware devices. Moving on to the software. Software actually consists of the set of instructions known as the programs, which will instruct the computer what tasks to be performed and how it should be performed. Softwares, they are consisting of the programs which will actually instruct the hardware device or the computer system what operations it has to be performed, and it also tells how it has to be performed. That is nothing but the software. Moving on to the next terminology, that is the data. What exactly the data might be? Any raw values or the raw data which will be provided as the input to the computer system by the programmer, and then this data will get processed in order to generate certain meaningful information out of the computer after processing is known as the data. It might be any like text, document, image, sound. It might be any kind of document. So all they come under the data. Usually when I say Rahul 78 C, like that, when I mention, it is a kind of a raw data. When I give it to the computer system for the processing, then it will produce me the useful information. Rahul, student of C section who has scored 78%. This is nothing but the process data, or you can also refer it to as an information. Usually the user will give the input, which will be in the form of raw data. Computer will process it and produce the useful, meaningful information out of it. Then Moving on to the last terminology, that is the users. Users are the people who actually write the computer programs in order to interact with the computer, or you can also call them the users as the programmers who who write the programmers, or the person, or the common people who are using the computer purpose for their computational task can also be called as the users. It might be the one who write the computer programs or the one who will interact with the computer in order to perform any kind of task on the computer, then we can call them as or refer them as the users. Moving on to the next topic, that is the review of block diagram of computer. So this is the block diagram of computer which we have already studied in first PUC. So let us have a glance over it. So computer system actually consists of the 4 main units. The first unit that it consists is the input unit. The second is the central processing unit. So in the central processing unit, again we have the 3 different parts. So here I can show you the central processing unit, that is CPU. First part is the control unit. Then it also consists of the ALU, and CPU also consists of the registers. Okay, so again this completely is a second unit, and the third unit is the storage unit. Okay, wherein it is having again 2 parts, the primary storage and the secondary, and the last unit is the output unit. Moving on to the first unit, that is the input unit. So here in the input unit, the users will interact with the computer via the input unit. Okay, usually whenever we have to give any kind of input, that will be through the input unit. What is the functionality of this input unit is it will accept the data from the user, convert it into the form that has been understandable by the computer. It will convert which we are providing the data will be English level language, that's the high level language. It will be converted into the computer understandable form, which is zeros and ones. And the input might be anything. It might be a character, word, text, sound, images, documents, okay, voice message, anything it might be. And usually the input will be provided by the commonly used input devices like keyboard, mouse, joystick, scanner, trackball, microphone. It might be any kind of input devices. Okay, moving on to the next unit, that is the central processing unit. So this central processing unit, it is the only unit that can read and execute the program instructions, and it has the ability to make all kind of decisions and performs all sorts of calculation. It is the only unit that has the capability to read and execute. Hence it is usually called as the brain of the computer. So this is the only unit that has the processing capability. It will perform any sort of calculations, okay, which are being given by the user. Hence the CPU will control, it will coordinate and supervises the entire operations of the computer. So this unit is actually responsible for the processing of the input data. No any other unit has this capability of processing. And this CPU, it consists of the control unit, ALU, and then registers. What is these registers are usually, they are like a temporary storage device, temporary storage for the data, or it may store the instructions or any kind of addresses or any kind of intermediate results that the calculations are being performed by the CPU. That registers will be storing all the temporary kind of data. Okay, moving on to the first unit of this CPU, that is the ALU. We will see first. ALU is nothing but stands for arithmetic and logical unit, which actually performs all kind of the arithmetic and logical operations on the provided input data. Arithmetic operations, we all know that, like addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, all such kinds of operations. And it also performs the relation operations like less than, greater than, equals to, not equal to, and logical operations like and, not, okay, XOR, NOR, all such kinds of logical operations will be performed by this ALU. Moving on to the next one, that is the control unit. Control unit, which will control the overall operations of the computer. That means whenever the input unit is being provided by the user, the data will first, whatever the raw data, it will first reach to the storage. In this, it will reach to the primary memory. In primary memory, we have two units, that is RAM and ROM. So the data will go first to the random access memory, that is RAM it will go. From RAM, the data will first, it will be passed to the CPU. In CPU, first the data will come to the control unit. This control unit, it will divide that entire instruction into the series of instructions, and then one by one instruction will be provided with to the ALU to perform the processing. And whatever it will process, the data will be stored temporarily in the registers. That is what is the use of this register. Understood? So this control unit, it is the responsibility for overall operations of the computer. It means it actually checks the sequence of the execution of instruction. It will control and coordinates the overall functioning of the units of the computer. It's the responsibility of the CU. It will see which instruction has to be given first for the processing. It will decide. It will first divide the entire instruction into series of instruction. Then it will decide which instructions to be forwarded to the first ALU. It will forward. Hence, it also see to the functionality whether all the devices of the computer units are been working or no. Hence, it will entirely control and coordinates the overall functioning of the computer system. Moving on to the next, that is the register. That is the third part of this CPU, the register. These registers are usually high-speed storage units which are placed within the CPU itself. You can see here within the CPU itself. But they are having very less storage capacity. But they are very high speed. Because the processing has to be, your processing of your CPU should be fast. These registers are being provided with a high speed capacity. Usually, because they are being only used by the CPU, hence they can also be referred to as the CPU's working memory, which are the temporary storage units. Usually these registers are not referenced by any kind of addresses. Like in case of primary memory, we have random access memory where the data is being stored by using storage location. If we are storing the data in the storage memory location, obviously we have to make use of the address in order to store the data and in order to fetch the data from your computer. But these registers are used in CPU. They are not at all been having any kind of addresses. Directly the CPU alone can use the data. Hence they are also called as CPU's working memory. Okay, so here these registers can be accessed directly. They can be manipulated by the CPU during the instruction execution. And these registers have the capability to store the data, instructions, addresses, any intermediate results that are being calculated and processed by this ALU. Such kinds of results or the data will be stored in these registers. I hope you are able to understand. So moving on to that is the next unit, that is the storage unit. In case of storage unit, there are two types of memory associated in storage unit. The first is the primary memory and the second is the secondary memory. The primary is also usually referred to as the main memory. And usually this primary consists of two parts, that is random access memory and read-only memory. So main memory, whenever the input units, it receives the data from the user, first the data will be stored in the random access memory. Okay, it will store in that is the main memory, and it may be raw data, might be the raw data like instructions, intermediate results, all such kinds of data will be stored here. The input units that has to be processed will have to be first brought into the main memory before processing takes place. Before the data is being sent for the processing, the input unit will be first brought into this main memory. And this main memory, what all kind of data it will store? It will store the data, instructions, program or intermediate results. Okay, and this main memory also stores the output data temporarily. Now suppose example, input data is provided, the data will be stored in the main memory will forward that data for the processing. Now after the processing, the ALU will forward that data through the with the help of the registers, which are the temporary storage of the CPU. Through the help of these registers, the day before that process data is nothing but your output. Before the output is directly handed over to the output unit, the output will be stored back again to the main memory. Okay, then this main memory will forward that output to the output unit. Therefore, we say that this main memory is having the capability to store the instructions, programs, okay, intermediate results also, and it also has the capability to store the output data before the output is being sent to the output unit. Okay, and hence CPU will work with the information that has been stored with the main memory. Whatever information has been stored with this main memory, the CPU will be continuously working with such kind of memory. Then moving on to the second part of the storage unit, that is the secondary memory. This secondary memory is also being referred to as the external memory of the computer system, which will help you to store huge amount of data permanently, which is very less expensive comparatively to your main memory. For example, I can give magnetic disk, magnetic tapes, optical disk, your flash drives, external hard disk, all those will such kind of storage, your hard disk, all such kind of devices comes under the secondary storage. Moving on to the last unit. The last unit is your output unit. This output unit, it will always convey the information to the one or more user in an user understandable form. Okay, in a not a computer understandable form is zeros and ones. So input unit, it will accept the data from the user and it will convert that data into the computer understandable form. Whereas the output unit, it will after processing, okay, it will convert and it will convey that useful information in a user understandable form. Hence this output unit provides the processed data, that is the result which has been generated after the processing of the data. Now here the result might be again anything like in the form of text, sound, image, document. Okay, the computer, and it will display that output by using the output devices. It might be like monitor, or it may directly send that output for the printer itself or the plotter for the printing purpose, and it might be send the sound signals to the speaker also. So speaker is also one of our output device. So commonly used output devices are nothing but the printer, plotter, okay, monitor, speakers. Through those the output or the process data will be displayed to the user by the output unit. So these all four units are the it includes for the block diagram of computer. So I hope all the concepts have been clear here. Okay, what are the certain terminologies: computer, hardware, software, data, users, and the block diagram of a computer. So I hope you are understanding. So in our next video, we'll continue with the few more topics, like we will be discussing about what is motherboard, what are the different types of motherboards, and the components of motherboard. Take care of yourself. Okay, watch the videos clearly, solve the assignments. Thank you, students.